meeting of Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission. It's an exciting meeting. We have a packed agenda, and we have 3 of our 4 new commissioners here. So what we'll do is we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then I'm going to go off agenda a little bit. We'll do introductions, and then we'll move through the agenda. So Commissioner McDaniel, can I ask you to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, since we've got our new commissioners, I thought what we'd do is we'll start, go around the table and introduce ourselves. Commissioner Brown, why don't I ask you as our ex officio member closest to Commissioner Wingfield's old seat to start us.
His old seat, right. Don Brown, I'm the Colorado Commissioner of Agriculture, and I originate from Yuma, Colorado, about 70 miles from here. My fondest memory of Burlington is not having this beat us by 50 points, just by 40.
Commissioner Pepler.
Good morning, I'm Colleen Pepler. I'm from the Platteville Meade area. I am originally from Washington County, Akron, so I know Yuma, I know Burlington, and very pleased to be here.
Welcome. Commissioner McDaniel.
Good morning, Marvin McDaniel. Just celebrating my 1 year, just over 1 year anniversary, so I guess we can't call ourselves newbies anymore, me and Marie and Carrie, so happy to be here and happy to be out in Burlington.
Great. Just a comment for everyone, you know, it's been a lot of change. I was the newest commissioner, I think for 3.5, almost 4 years, we didn't have any change on the commission, and now we've got 7 new members out of 11. So welcome to you all, but it is a lot of change for those of us that have been around a while. Commissioner Haskett.
Good morning. Marie Haskett, and I'm from Meeker, Colorado, over on the northwest slope, or northwest corner. I'm an outfitter over there and been a little busy hunting the last couple of weeks, but glad to be here on the plains where it's a little warmer.
Commissioner Vigil.
Jim Vigil. I'm from down in Trinidad, and I'm one of the senior commissioners. Been here 6 years. As a matter of fact, there are 3 of us that were put on the newly merged commission when the agencies, right after the agencies were merged.
Commissioner Zimmerman.
Hi, I'm Michelle Zimmerman. I'm also part of the senior staff now. Just kidding. Yeah, from Summit County. So also nice to be out here where it's a little bit less snowy. And welcome everyone. Really excited to get to know the new commissioners.
Commissioner Vigil is our chairman of the Finance Committee and secretary, and Commissioner Zimmerman is our vice chair. And I'm Chairman John Howard from Boulder, Colorado. I'm a sportsman's rep, and I've been on the commission now, I think 4 years next month. And really look forward to having all of you, the new voices on the commission. It's very exciting. So, Director Broscheid.
Good morning, Bob Broscheid. I'm the director for CPW. I've been here, it'll be almost 5 years and about 2 weeks. I think December 5th is my 5-year anniversary, and boy, how time flies.
And Laura, who makes everything happen. Tell us a bit about you, Laura.
Hello. My first meeting here, but just want to let you know there's restrooms through those doors, and to the left in the gift shop, there's also restrooms for the commissioners through these back doors down that hallway. Lunch will be through those double doors and down the wooden walkway to the barn, and dinner will be down there as well.
And Madeline representing DNR.
Good morning, Madeline West with the Department of Natural Resources, here representing Executive Director Bob Randall. That's it.
Commissioner Bray.
My name's Robert Bray. I'm the senior member because I'm currently serving my 10th year if you count my previous Parks and Wildlife, or just Parks or Wildlife Commission. I was on Wildlife Commission for a few years, and then with the merged agency. I'm from Southwest Colorado, and I'm the ag rep, one of the ag reps.
Commissioner Hauser.
Good morning. I'm Carrie Hauser. I am also glad to no longer be one of the newbies, but I think we still are really in a lot of ways. My day job, I'm president and CEO of Colorado Mountain College, and I live in the Roaring Fork Valley.
Commissioner Garcia.
I am a newbie. Yay. And I've 40 years in Denver, Colorado, but we have a second home in Grand County, up in Grand Lake. We've been there for 25 years.
Commissioner Taylor.
Good morning, Jen Taylor. I live in Grand Junction, Colorado on the West Slope. Happy to be a new member of the commission. Thank you, and pleased to be here. Thank you to the town of Burlington for hosting this. It's a great facility.
And a very important member of our team here at the end of the table, Council. Why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Jake Matter. I'm from the Colorado Attorney General's office. I've been with the AG's office since 2011 and been representing the Parks and Wildlife Commission for about a year and a half.
Thanks. Let me just say to all the new commissioners, I said this when we got new commissioners last year, we really welcome your participation from the first minute. The 4 years will go very quickly. And so all of the 3 commissioners that came on last year were early contributors. If you don't contribute in this meeting, I'll call on you. So you might as well just pick your spots because we really do encourage that. All of our new commissioners last year took on leadership roles for us that were really helpful. Commissioner Hauser played the lead role in our Forum for Underrepresented Communities in the next state park, and also hosted us and has played a real role, I think, in connecting us to a lot of important voices in the conservation world and in the political world that we were not as well connected with. So that was super helpful last year. Thank you, Commissioner Hauser. Commissioner McDaniel took on, I think, the hardest thing, which is helping us with our IT and our licensing system, and has been a real help there. And that was something that I think we had him pegged as soon as we could get him involved, and he's been a huge help. And then, of course, Commissioner Haskett was a huge help to us as the lead director on chronic wasting disease, and I know it's been an enormous amount of time on that. So we'll look for all those types of roles for you in the coming year, and certainly put your hand up because we always have more things like that than we can fill. So. And welcome again. So let's just dive right in. The first thing is the minutes. I think Commissioner McDaniel had a change.
Yes, there's 2 corrections in there on pages 2 and 8. When it lists the commissioners, my name's missing, although it does show me as present at the meetings farther down, so if you could correct that. And then for Commissioner Vigil, on September 7th, it shows him as absent when he was present.
I have both of those.
Thank you.
Any other comments or corrections on the minutes?
I do. I have one comment that I shared with Laura already.
Thank you, Council. Go ahead.
Concerning the description of the executive session item. There are numerous bases to enter executive session, one of which was articulated in the draft minutes, and I shared with Ms. Porter that subsection 1 and 2 should be referenced, and I gave her that markup.
Council, will you do me a favor, and after we get all the corrections and we go ahead and approve the minutes, will you just work with Laura to make certain all of them are in place?
Yes, we'll
because there's a few more changes here than usual.
Sure.
So the chair would entertain a motion around the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Laura, Commissioner Vigil moved that the minutes be approved, and who seconded? I'm sorry. Commissioner McDaniel. We'll do this one by voice vote. If that's okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you very much. The minutes are approved with those changes then. Next up is corrections to the agenda, and then also whether the consent agenda, whether there are any items that folks would like to have removed and talked about in open session. I'm not seeing any changes. Commissioners, one thing I'd just like to put forward here, and let me just tell you what I'd like to do and then why, and then if any commissioner objects, please just say so, and we'll do it as it's set forth in the agenda. But we have at the end of the second day our officers' elections, and I've tried to have the nominations come forward to Laura. And right now we only have one set of nominations. It's for one slate, and that's for the continuing officers to continue for another year. If anyone else has nominations, they'd like to think about it for another night, I'd be happy to hold it open. But my thought was if we did this now, then we could work into our discussions in the next day and a half what we want to do next year and get some of the larger ideas out on the table so that we can work on those. Otherwise, it's going to be January before we're all together, and because of the way the Public Meeting Act works, we can't really, work on it until January. So my thought was to go ahead, have the elections, and then we'll go ahead and work into the discussion some of the initiatives that we'd like to try for next year. Is that okay? Does anyone have an objection to that? Great. Could one of the I guess one of the commissioners that has put the ballot forward go ahead and make a formal motion to approve that ballot or to put it forward, and then we'll get a second, and then we'll take a vote. Commissioner Bray.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to formally nominate the current slate of officers, Mr. John Howard as chairman, Michelle Zimmerman as vice chair, and Jim Vigil as secretary to continue for another year as the leadership of our commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Bray. Commissioner Haskett seconds. Commissioners, we can do this one. We can have a secret ballot. We can have a voice vote, which would be my preference, or we could poll verbally, but I don't see any reason not to just proceed with a voice vote. It seems to be okay with everyone. All those in favor of the existing slate continuing for another year, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? So, Laura, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate that vote of confidence in the team, as I'm sure they all do as well. Okay. Then we'll proceed with the agenda with that one change. Next up is commissioners' questions and comments. For new commissioners, this is an opportunity for you to tell all of us events that you might have attended that are around conservation, our mission, anything else you'd like to tell us about what you've been up to since the last meeting. It's not one of those things where you have to tell us anything, but it is often very interesting to hear other types of things that folks are doing. So, any comments or questions? Commissioner Vigil.
I was fortunate enough to attend the grand opening of the trail at Cheyenne Mountain State Park that those of us who've been around a long time talked about it probably 5 years ago or so. It's done, and it goes up Cheyenne Mountain from our state park. It goes up almost to the antennas. I didn't walk it.
I was gonna say, did you do it?
But when it's capable for horseback, I will try it then. But if I can't get there on horseback, I'm not going to go. So. But it's a terrific trail from everything I heard, and the volunteers that are involved is tremendous. Cheyenne Mountain State Park just has a great number of volunteers that make things happen, and this is a good example of what volunteers do for this agency.
Follow-up question.
Commissioner Zimmerman.
I remember when we talked about that trail, I think it was 5 years ago now, they had talked about the difficulty in creating the steps so that it would be horseback. Do you know if that was a part of this construction, or if they're considering that, or if there are plans? The
access for horses is about halfway up the trail. And then after that, it just gets too narrow for horses.
Okay.
So you can go up part way, and then there's a loop back. But they're thinking about taking it all the way to the top with horses at some point. And the real long-range goal would be to go from there to Mueller. And if that went all the way to Mueller State Park, that'd be a terrific trail.
Outstanding. Commissioner Bray.
Thank you. Well, I've been primarily immersed in trying to sell cattle off drought ranges and hunting for the last 6 weeks, but I did have an interesting contact. Just this past week, I had received a couple emails from a constituency group asked to meet with me. So I met with the Great Old Broads for Wilderness, and they wanted me to be sure and pass on to all you ladies that they accept young broads as well. But
Great too.
but they're an organization that they're a national organization, but this was the San Juan chapter. They're headquartered in Ridgeway, which is about an hour's drive from me. So I met with them, and it was a very interesting meeting. Their primarily message was to get know a little more about CPW, and then the future funding that we have a Meridian report here in our booklet that they were concerned about some of those. Their big concern is that at this point anyway, that we're spending too much money on making new trails, and we should spend more money on maintaining the ones we got, and be real careful building new trails. They think that the trail system is being overused. That was one of the strong messages that they sent to me. But anyway, it was an interesting meeting, interesting group. As you can imagine, we kind of come from opposite sides of the spectrum here, but it was a very productive meeting. We got along very good, and I was happy to do that.
Let me also thank Commissioner Bray. I got to spend 8 days out on his ranch in a fruitless pursuit of big game animals, but it was a great experience. And I think one of the things that was so valuable for me was to actually be on the ground for 8 days in a drought setting. That's not a new thing for me, but I've never seen anything like what I saw there. There wasn't, and I had comments, I think commissioners had this in their email, from hunters that were in units right near Commissioner Bray's talking about all the cattle and there's no grass. And the answer is, it's the drought. And it was very dramatic. So very useful for me to see, and I think helpful in being a commissioner. So thanks again, Commissioner Bray. Commissioner Hauser.
Good morning. I wanted to thank our chairman, about 3 weeks after we hosted the Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting in Glenwood Springs. We pushed rewind and play and did it again. The National Board of American Rivers met also in Glenwood Springs at Mortgage Commons, where we were in September, and again we did a repeat and went back up to Bear Ranch. The bears were incredibly generous in the month of September, allowing us to utilize the ranch twice. And Chairman Howard, on his way back, I believe, from being at Commissioner Bray's ranch and hunting, stopped in to sort of commingle those two organizations. We had others as well. That it was just a nice opportunity for a national board to be outside of DC. This is the only time of the year. Once a year, they meet in a river basin, and they were so impressed just with the turnout of leadership from Colorado, from our various different nonprofit organizations, our different agencies and otherwise, just to be there to host and welcome the American Rivers Group. So we did some eco flights over Deep Creek, and there was just lots of synergies between the work of the two organizations, and certainly larger DNR and others. So just wanted to say thanks to Chairman Howard.
Well, thank you. It was a great event. We got to see or meet former Governor Romer. I can't remember all the titles that Russ George has, but of course Russ George was there, and a variety, Joel Orzaki, a variety of other folks. So it was a great event. Commissioner Taylor.
I realize there has been a Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting since this event, but attending the Cameo Shooting Range grand opening was a moment in time. It was a fantastic celebration, and seeing the staff, JT's crew, it was quite an impressive location, facility, wonderful celebration of the Phase 1 grand opening, and that, frankly, was the that was the pivot point for me to submit my application for the commission.
Oh, good.
That was a great event, good people. There was a Trails Summit in Fruita, Colorado, an international symposium that I was fortunate to attend. It was a fantastic representation from around the world of leading trail builders and economic tourism folks that have and want to and plan to develop a mountain bike tourism economic development type story for their communities. So it was great to hear from people around the world, success stories, what not to do in some cases, and what has worked well. So that was fabulous. Was fortunate to attend one of the Meridian Institute's intake stakeholder sessions in Grand Junction at the CPW facility. Met with Conservation Colorado as well, having a Western Slope branch in Grand Junction. That was a great informative conversation. I too, Commissioner Bray, have a meeting scheduled here in the near future with the Great Old Broads for Wilderness, a fantastic organization, as well as COTMOBA, the Colorado Plateau Mountain Bike Trail Association. I work very closely with that organization. And just recently, Outdoor Retailer had its inaugural November trade show in Denver. Now, as we know that it's moved from Salt Lake to Denver. That took place last week and was a well-attended show. It was an earlier show for the cycle of the outdoor industry, so it was great to see the first version of that. And it was an opportunity for it was the day after the elections was the kickoff of the trade show, and it was, I believe, the first public appearance for incumbent Governor Polis to speak. So,
Commissioner Haskett.
Good morning. I was unable to attend parts of the meeting in September, and I wanted to make some comments on the 5-year season structure. And after being out in the field in this past hunting season, and there's a lot of things that I think are changing in Colorado. And as you mentioned, the drought and the climate change, it's affecting our seasons, and I think we do need to look a little harder at what we're doing. I think we want to have quality hunting, customer satisfaction, and we also want to meet our objectives, and I'm not sure that we're doing that. I have some suggestions that I've thought long and hard about it, which also has to do with preference points and the 5-year season structure, but we offer some specialty hunts for species, and I think that we should look harder at doing that for all species. 2 years ago, we started one in Unit 61, and it now takes 17 points to draw that tag. But people are using their points to draw that tag. But it can be a lesser season or less tag season with just a few tags issued. And it might help also meet our objectives. There's also other seasons that we did that. I noticed we have one for deer in GMU 69 this year, and it already takes several preference points to draw it also. There's several of them, if you look around, that we've done that too, and I think it would help. I think we need to have a break longer in between the first and second season. We don't have to start on Saturday. I don't know why we ever did that years ago. I think animals we're all creatures of habit, and I think they're very used to that. In the end of the season, the hunting gets very good, but at the beginning, it's awful. I also think that we hunt them too long sometimes, and I would like to see the cow season change. I don't know if it's this way statewide, but we hunt them for 90 days in northwest Colorado, and I just think it's too long anymore. It worked a while ago, but it doesn't anymore. I think that's all I had.
Commissioner Garcia, do you have a question about Commissioner Haskett? Because I actually, if you don't mind, I'll just follow up. Could you talk a little bit about, so are you suggesting, Marie, that we move things back? Is that, because climate change, or that we're trying to move the seasons back farther to improve hunting? Is that one of the overall points?
Yes, but I also just think we need to change them.
Sorry.
We've done the same thing for a long time. I like the idea that you guys had of the September 1st start. I think August this year especially was way too early. It was way too hot, way too dry. And not that it wasn't at the end, but we can't guess what the weather's going to do, but we can at least move it back a little bit. And the same thing with the second season. It almost always, the first season we have a little bit of weather, but by second season it starts getting hot again. But having a 2-day break in there those animals also never have a chance to get back to normal. If we have a little longer break, I think it would help. And it would help us meet our objective, have hunters a lot happier, and have that customer retention that we do want.
Is that within, Director, is that within the scope of the, okay, so those comments fit right into the, great. Sorry, thank you. Commissioner Garcia.
I was present along with some folks that are here with the governor's signing of the executive order last month for the new, what is it, the Interagency Trails and Recreation Council. Looks like a good start for something new. I was proud to be there. So that's all.
Great. Commissioner Zimmerman.
Thanks, Chairman Howard. Couple of things. Commissioner Hauser was able to rally a few of us to be able to attend. Governor Hickenlooper was able to come through Summit County and just do a general community discussion with some of the folks at, was held at Colorado Mountain College, and Commissioner Hauser was there, and it was really a nice community, I don't know if it was a farewell tour or what you might want to call it, but it was a really nice back and forth discussion with Governor Hickenlooper, and of course he's always so candid and open and honest. It was a really nice conversation that covered a lot of different topics, as well as public lands, as you might imagine in a place like Summit County that has so much public land. Also spent a lot of time, a couple of meetings with Robin Palkus, who was the main lead facilitator and author of the Future Alternative Fundings study that we're going to hear about later. So, as some of you might know, and I didn't give a larger background, but I've been on the commission for 6 years, and prior to that, I was on the Habitat Stamp Committee. I'm also a mountain biker and very involved in the mountain bike community. So, this alternative funding study and how do we more effectively engage with some of our non-traditional users, but that, of course, benefit, everyone benefits from the successes and the work of CPW. So learning how to better engage with some of those folks and help those folks engage with us has been a really important topic for me and my friends and cohorts and colleagues. So it's been great to learn about that study. I'm excited to hear from Robin later today. And I'll be trying to move that study forward into action as well. So I'm sure I'll be looking to a lot of you to help me out on that. Let's see, the other couple of folks I met with, Dave Weens and Aaron Clark from IMBA, the International Mountain Bike Association, to just make sure that they felt like they had representation and that their thoughts and concerns, obviously it's very early on talking about how the mountain bike community plays into any kind of a funding opportunity, but wanted to make sure that they felt like they were being heard and involved, and also wanted to make sure they understood our concerns from CPW, that, our history, our foundation, that we are a predominantly funded by sportsmen. Most of what we do does affect sportsmen and ag, so I think it was pretty important to make sure that the leaders of the Mountain Bike Association understood where we were coming from as well. So I think just that open dialogue, making sure we have constant communication, is going to help get us where we want to go. And then the only other thing, this year, unfortunately, I was not able to attend the SHIFT conference. It's a conference up in Jackson Hole. And if you recall, the agency, this commission adopted the principles, the SHIFT principles, and I won't go into all of that, but basically the concept that we want to be good stewards of the land and of the wildlife, and make sure that we are crossing all the different jurisdictions and various different stakeholders. And this year's SHIFT conference, interestingly enough, the focus was a lot about how nature is a prescription for health and wellness. So that's not necessarily one of the topics we bring into our conversations a lot, but I thought it was interesting that that's where SHIFT went this year, was how getting out into the outdoors and understanding that connection to nature through whatever means you may get out there is so vital to our very well-being, our very foundation, our core health as a human. So I just wanted to pass that along, that it was interesting that SHIFT took that perspective this year when they haven't in the past. So just something to kind of put in the back of our back pocket. Thanks.
Commissioner Vigil.
Kind of follow up with that, Commissioner Zimmerman. Would it be a good idea to start a committee, much like the Finance Committee, a small committee to pursue the Meridian study and how we do that alternative funding, the pros and cons? And I would ask that if we do, you would lead that committee.
Yes, and I'd be happy to if I had the, confidence of the commission behind me. I think I keep looking to my right, looking at Deputy Director West, because I think that DNR has had a lot of involvement, of course, with this study. So I think after we hear from Robin and from Meridian Institute and the key takeaways from all of these forums that were held throughout the state, I think we'll have a much better picture and idea of how they recommend, or how people that were in the meetings recommend that we move forward. And I think certainly a committee of this commission may be a good opportunity, as well as perhaps bringing in a larger group with some of these other groups that are already, the co-op and some of these groups that are already working towards this. Luis Benitez, the Office of Outdoor Tourism, some of those groups as well. So I think there's a lot of cross-pollination opportunities, and I think this commission needs to be certainly, if not leading it, the hub bringing a lot of that stuff together. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
What I wanted to suggest, this is one of the ideas I had jotted down, was that Commissioner Zimmerman sort of be our lead director and we always have these terrible terms, and the non-consumptive. I think of it more as recreationalists. And so my thought on this, Commissioner Vigil, was that she would take the lead. We'll see the report, we'll see what DNR, we've obviously had an election. So I mean, there's a variety of these factors. And then Commissioner Zimmerman, I thought what she would do is be our spearhead. And if you want to form a committee, you'll let us know. If you want to join some other group that gets formed in the legislature, any of those types of things, but you'll be our lead person, because you're so well positioned for it. So if other commissioners agree, that was kind of my approach on one of the new ideas that we had, was that you be our spearhead and you tell us what you need.
Sounds good.
And so that was one idea. The other thing I asked Commissioner Zimmerman I'd like to ask her to take on, and we've talked about this a little bit in the last public meeting, is we don't cover all the events we could cover. And by that I mean, I tried my best to go to almost all the sportsman events I could. I just can't do it all. I know Commissioner Bray does, I know Commissioner Vigil does. And what I'd like to do is have a little more organization around sportsmen, parks, all of our, I guess, affinity groups. And I asked Commissioner Zimmerman if she could do that. I think you've got some new administrative support that you could put on this. And so what I'm hoping is that we'll be able to populate sort of a spreadsheet working with staff and with all the outside groups to get the list, to get the dates, to make certain that we know and we're aware, and then Commissioner Zimmerman would try and match up commissioners to the events. And the goal is not that we have to have 100% participation. I would just like to get us out in public a little bit more. And I think this is one of the ways we can do it. We've had a lot of feedback. We don't tell our story as well as we could. This is an easy one that we don't have to go to the legislature for, or the Joint Budget Committee. I think we can just do it. So Commissioner Zimmerman, if you'll take that on, I'd be grateful.
Happy to, as long as I have supportive staff, of course. I need to know when and where these events are, and then it's a great way too for all of us to understand if Commissioner Pepler's going to something and someone else is also going, so that we make sure if there is an open records or open meetings notice that we get ahead of that. Last thing we want to do is, in our effort to be doing good things and being out in front, to have our hands slapped because we didn't notice things and follow things legally. So that's another opportunity for us to make sure we know what everyone's doing and carpool where we can and that kind of thing, but also make sure that we're staying ahead of the requirements.
Great. Any other comments from commissioners then? Madeline, I think you're up with the Department of Natural Resources update.
Okay, thank you. Well, good morning, commissioners. As always, it's such a pleasure to be here with you today. Let me know if you can't hear me. My ears are a little bit clogged, and so in an attempt to not scream at you, I might talk more quietly. Well, on behalf of the department, I really want to extend a welcome to the new commissioners. Thank you so much for your service and being willing to serve on what I think is the best commission in all of state government by far. So welcome. We really are indebted to you offering your time to us. have a few updates from the department. Commissioner Garcia, thank you for mentioning the governor's executive order and for being there on October 26th at the signing ceremony. For those of you who weren't there and weren't aware, the governor signed an executive order that did a whole bunch of things. It ultimately formed this interagency council that Commissioner Garcia mentioned, and formalizes interagency work that's been going on for the last several years to try to promote the governor's Colorado the Beautiful vision, which is to ensure that within a generation, every Coloradan lives within 10 minutes of a park, trail, or open space. And this executive order really broadened that scope a bit to really talk about this council's role in advancing recreation opportunities and conservation in the state. And the executive order really highlighted the inextricable link between outdoor recreation and conservation in Colorado, and all the conservation work that's been done for generations around the state is what's led to a world-class recreation environment, and a reason why in Colorado alone the outdoor industry has grown in its economic impact and now contributes $62 billion in direct and indirect output to Colorado's economy, and that's an enormous growth from just 5 years ago. And those numbers are part of a study that Colorado Parks and Wildlife has been doing and will be putting out more publicly next month in the revision to the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. The executive order also directed CPW to do a number of things, which I think is really exciting, because this executive order, by highlighting CPW, I think really positions the agency to be a leader among many people working in this sector in the state of Colorado. And so I'll just tell you a couple of those specific directives. The agency is directed to continue to look for new funding sources that support responsible trail development, and really to continue to improve the way that new trails are developed. Commissioner Bray, I think this speaks to some of the conversations you had with the Great Old Broads. I mean, many people, many organizations in the state will tell you that, you know, the demand for outdoor recreation is immense and growing, and if we don't stop for a minute and find ways to be thoughtful and plan out that development, I think we will, you know, have some regrets. And local governments are really, I think, on the front lines of dealing with this as they're grappling with ways to grow their economies, to deal with demand, and to do so in a way that, you know, keeps intact, you know, the values of their community. Chaffee County just got some funding, or has just proposed, I should say, for some funding to CPW that you all will consider tomorrow to do more of a master recreation and conservation plan for their community. And we've been talking to a number of other counties that are interested in doing similar work. So this executive order really highlights the ability for the Interagency Council to provide support to those local governments in those endeavors. The executive order also directs CPW to continue to facilitate partnerships in the implementation of the new statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, which, as you can imagine, has gotten a lot of public input. CPW staff are taking that public comment now and will be preparing a final plan for the governor to sign in December, before the end of the year. And so that will be, I think, a really great roadmap for how this agency, working in close partnership with all the other organizations and users around the state, can advance recreation in a way that, you know, takes conservation values into account. And finally, we're really excited that the executive order included a directive to CPW to increase the diversity of full-time employees by 10% over the next 5 years. And this is something that, from the governor's direction in Colorado the Beautiful, we've been talking a lot about, how to, you know, make the employees of the, you know, most public-facing agency in our department, but for sure, but one of the most public-facing recreation managers in the state, really track with the changing demographics of the population of Colorado. And I would say this is really more of a issue with our internal state hiring process than anything else. And so we'll be looking for funding this year and into next year to help work with the department's HR staff to identify, just unintentional biases in the hiring process and ways to maybe streamline the hiring of people with more diverse backgrounds. So we're excited about that. So that's all I have to say about the executive order. I have a couple more updates, and then I'm happy to take any questions. Last week, the department finalized an administrative order, which is like a department policy about pollinators, supporting actions that protect pollinators and reduce negative impacts to pollinators. And this is really, this was an opportunity for us to highlight the good work that's already happening across divisions within DNR that manage a lot of land. And there are programs within CPW primarily that really focus on the planting of native species on state parks and offer citizen science opportunities for monitoring of pollinators in state parks. The Colorado Natural Areas program that works with imperiled plants and other species really is a big proponent of supporting pollinators. And we also have some regulatory divisions who, in their role in requiring reclamation, really advance the planting of native species that support pollinators. And so I was able to present that policy to a statewide pollinator summit last Friday, and they were all very happy and I would say a little bit surprised to hear all the work that the agency does to support something that they care a lot about, pollinators, and that just speaks to this relevancy question and the need to continue to tell the story of the breadth of work that our agency does. A couple more things, not so CPW related, just so that you are aware. The Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission continues to work on a couple initiatives that we've mentioned to you in the past. Their Financial Assurance Technical Working Group has been meeting to develop recommendations to address the future of orphan wells in the state, which is really a growing problem. And by December 1, they should have recommendations to present to their commission. The commission also continues to discuss opportunities for increasing setbacks for oil and gas development from schools. This has been an ongoing conversation about, the definition of what a school is and where, that setback starts. Is it from the building itself or some other part of the school property? And they expect that the commission will take up a rulemaking in December and January on that topic. Related to water, funding for implementing the Colorado's water plan has been a big point of discussion since the water plan was finalized, and I'm really happy to report that the governor's proposed budget includes $30 million for funding to implement Colorado's water plan. That's a small portion of the estimated total cost to fully implement the water plan, but it's a really big chunk for state government that has a pretty shrinking state budget at this point in time, so we're proud of that. And finally, I should use this opportunity to let you all know that after almost 6 years with the department, I've accepted a position with the Teddy Roosevelt Conservation Partnership to be their deputy director for their Center for Western Lands, and so this will be my last commission meeting, and it's very bittersweet because I've so appreciated the opportunity to work with all of you on the commission. I'm so proud to be able to be a small part in all that you do, and I've learned so much from the dedicated and passionate staff at Colorado Parks and Wildlife over the last years. So thank you all for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Madeline. It's been great to have your support all these years, and you still have to come pheasant hunting with me.
Commissioner Howard, I would love that.
We'll set that up. Director, I think you're next up. Well, actually, I'm skipping Commissioner Brown, who, of course, is my favorite presenter for all of our meetings. 'Cause he always has such a good note of humor to the meetings.
So that's why you skip me, right? Actually, it makes him nervous. Bob and I made the paper last time we talked, and so I suspect there's something to that. I want to start out by, I'm from a little community about 60 miles north of here, so welcome to God's country. That's because nobody else will claim it. My grandfather came in this area in 1908 via Kansas, which wasn't very far. And if you go up here north, and you'll be going that way, you pheasant hunters, where Kansas and Nebraska tee into Colorado, my grandfather homesteaded 20-some miles into Colorado. We often think that was because that's where the mule died. And like I tell people, we've been there about 110 years, and just as soon as we get enough money gathered up, we're going to get the heck out. I don't see much prospect of getting the heck out. When he came here, there were no trees, and the grass was belly deep on the horses that he came in here with. So my family's been here a long time, and I would like, when you get a few minutes, as we set in amongst this old machinery, when I see it, I probably see something different than you see. I see people sitting on it. I see ghosts of those things from the past. And I see those who made this great country possible. That's what I see. And I see a thrashing machine there, and I think all of you have seen the photo, the print of the older gentleman in his bib overalls with his wife, who appears to be a bit disgusted, and he's holding a fork, what everybody would just call a pitchfork. That is not a pitchfork. That is a bundle fork. It has 3 tines instead of 4 or 5. A manure fork would have 5. A pitchfork has 4. And a bundle fork has 3. So when you pitch the bundles into that yellow machine that's sitting right there, it's separated from the bundle easily. So technology has always existed. It just depends on what era you come from. And so it was a bundle fork. And I never ran a bundle fork. My dad talked about them. He said, you're lucky. You get to run levers and stuff like that. I want to take a minute to talk about agriculture, particularly since I'm not going to talk too much about the Department of Agriculture. We have 300 employees. We have a $50 million some budget. Bob just grins. That's a rounding error in his business here. But we do have all the brand inspectors. When you buy something this Christmas in a store, we're the ones that made sure that the right price is on it. When you weigh the vegetables in the same store, we're the ones that took care of those scales, whether it's a semi or if you go to one of those little shops that sells Colorado's new green leafy vegetable, we're responsible for those scales. So we do a lot of varied things in Colorado, but agriculture is the #2 industry in the state. That's a little known fact. That you eat cheaper than any place in the world. At 6.7% of your disposable income goes to food. That's the cheapest place in the world to eat. There's a reason. Less than 1% of America is ran by farmers. That leads everybody, as Secretary Vilsack, lets everybody else do what they want to do or what they need to do, because 1% feeds the nation. A little known fact, we talk about the large corporate farms. They don't exist. 97% of the United States farms are owned by families. Now, such as my family farm, which is over 20-some thousand acres, closer to 25. We have 3 LLCs. My wife and I have a corporation. We have a triple LP, but we're a family farm. And she already texted me this morning and wanted to know. She said, here's what she says to me. JJ is a -5 basis. What do you think we ought to do? So what that means is on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, January and July and June corn is trading at 4.002, and it takes they'll give us 5 cents less than that in June and July. That's what that meant. So these are businesses ran by business people. And when we talk about corporate farms, they really don't exist because corporate farms don't work well in a non-corporate world. A farm is no different than an emergency room. We deal with living things every day, and the sick calf needs to be doctored on a Sunday morning. God giveth, God taketh away. We've been running for 3 weeks solid now. No Sundays on or off. Doesn't matter. They're all on because God will take away in a few hours what we took a whole summer to do. So agriculture is an interesting business. 36% of Colorado is owned by the federal government. Close to 50% is owned by agriculture and private operators. So when you make decisions here, you're typically reaching out and touching someone who's in that business. I'm going to give a little bit of a philosophic report because last night I came in late from Denver and I spoke at a sustainability conference. And it's a group of food manufacturers who are real concerned about agriculturists being sustainable. As we're all aware, if it's written down, it makes it so. And if we say it often enough, it's true. There's no bigger expert about somebody, about something, than somebody that doesn't do it for a living. I don't pretend to be a lawyer or doctor or such, but I do think I know something a little about agriculture. And it disturbed me yesterday because the implication was, as these manufacturers were talking about sustainability, that in fact the inference is they're here to rescue agriculture, that agriculture is not sustainable. That's the inference. They don't say that, but that's the message they're conveying. And I can't help but think, I finally got a job at the age of 60. My wife said it was a wonderful thing, Don, you're finally getting a paycheck. My family had made money off the land for 110 years. Surely that's sustainable. Surely we're taking care of soil health. Surely we're taking care of the environment. Because if one burns the factory, you can't make widgets anymore. So when they talk about that, I got to thinking about sustainable and sustainability and the implication of it. And I think about when we watch NFL football on Sunday. They reference the skills position. Now what is the opposite of somebody who has no skill? Is an unskilled person, right? When they're talking about skill positions, they're talking about the backs and all those folks. They don't mention the linemen. So the guys up front are unskilled, evidently. Who's the top paid person in the NFL? It's quarterback. Who's the second top paid position? The left tackle. And he ain't got no skill. So words matter, and how it's said matters. And we in agriculture, at less than 1% of the population, struggle with, we ain't get no respect, as Rodney Dangerfield would say. Because we don't have to worry about it anymore, because this morning we had breakfast, I don't think there's anybody that worried about what they were going to, and where they were going to find it. And so this has turned into a bit of a lecture, and that's not my intent at all. But I do want you to recognize that society counts and needs the American farmer, and that agriculture is important, that we feed a lot of people, and that we need your help. Because the average age of the U.S. farmer is 59.5 years old. And I hate to admit it, but I know I look it. I'm a little older than that. And we have to replace them with young ones. These tractors in this room probably cost from $800 to $3,000 when they were brand new. Today, one not like it, but much larger, would cost $400,000. I got my fix this morning before I came here by driving by through the John Deere dealership and looking at the new corn planters. I just did. Couldn't help it. You know, I just deviated right off. I knew where I was going, but I had to drive through and look. Everybody else looks at new cars. I want to look at a new corn planter, right? They only cost $262,000. What the heck? I'll have one of those over there and two of these. By the way, we do. But anyway, point being, the business has changed. We talk about autonomous cars. Good Lord, my tractors have been autonomous for 18 years. GPS and screens and all that sort of thing. So at the end of the day, our partnership with you is extremely important. And I've felt very rewarded the last few years to work with each and every one of you, because I think you truly recognize the value agriculture has and the role that we provide in working with the wildlife and conservation. Farmers and ranchers invented the term conservation because they practice it every day. And so I think it's wonderful we've had a good relationship. I've certainly always appreciated your efforts, Bob. I think we've made great partners. I look forward to that in the future, now that I'm getting off my lecture stump. And you're certainly welcome to hunt at our place. So please come on up and do so. I won't be there. Peggy will be there. She's my full partner. I will tell you one mistake you do not want to make. When you see her and you ask her to hunt, don't say that Don said it was okay. Don't say that Don said this and that, because here's how she's going to handle that. She's going to say, well, Don normally lets everybody hunt. But what are you going to do with your second step? Well, what do you mean? Well, she said, I own half of it. And after the first step, you're on mine. You're welcome to hunt. Please enjoy it. Thank you so much. And I don't have much to say. You probably noticed that, John. But other than ag's doing great, except our commodity prices are low, and we need some help there. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Brown, what is the statistic that you often quote, I think from a couple years ago, a survey on Coloradans' perception of where their food comes from?
Well, it's disconcerting, and so we do a survey every 5 years in the Colorado Department of Agriculture to get a sense of where people are at and what they're thinking. And for the first time 2 years ago, after 20-some years of survey, the reason we have agricultural land is not for the production of food, but for open spaces. And that's where the typical Coloradoans' thinking process is. It's not for the production of food, it's for open space. That was the one I think you're thinking about.
Right. I think it was the first time more than half of the people identified food as coming from like supermarkets as opposed to farms.
Right. No, and that's just a known fact. That's where it comes from. Gas comes from a gas station.
Well, we certainly appreciate the partnership that you've always had and the support that that your department has given us, at least while I've been commissioner. And it's a very close relationship, obviously, on the wildlife side. If we don't have healthy private lands, we're not going to have healthy wildlife. So
no, and we absolutely have to have your help to get where we need to do with those who are truly experts, because they don't do it for a living. And we have to have your help for agriculture to survive. This group is essential to us, and it's deeply appreciated.
Commissioner Bray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Brown, you're much more eloquent than I am, but I did want to say a few things. So many times you don't get to say anything good or bad about someone except post-mortem, and this certainly, I hope, isn't the case. But the partnership and the leadership that you've provided at the Department of Ag is extraordinary, and you've done a fantastic job. And my hat is really off to you and Bob for the relationship that you forged between these two agencies. It hasn't always been a smooth road, and both of you deserve a ton of credit for that. It's extreme. As you mentioned, if we don't have private lands in the state, we don't have wildlife, and that is just the way it is. And that's not going to change. And you've educated the public, and you formed that coalition, and I thank both of you. It's been really good. But I am going to put you on the spot just a little bit as we move forward. As we move forward, and I don't know if you're able to attend the rest of our meeting here or not, but this explosion in outdoor rec, and it isn't truly an explosion. And I think you understand the challenges that it poses to the wildlife side of the issue and agriculture, but do you have any insight on how ag can play a role in that, and how we proceed? There's lots of issues, the funding issue, the access issues, the competition for our public lands. As you know, so many of us, my grandfather's mule died 2 years prior to yours at the opposite end of the state. And we darn sure haven't made enough money to buy a new one, because if we did, we would. But, so we have a lot of parallels. But this explosion in outdoor recreation has really come on, and really come on, particularly in the last 5-6 years, and I don't see an end in sight. So what role does ag play, and in partnership with the wildlife side of the agency, from your perspective?
Well, thank you, and thank you for those nice compliments. At the end of the day, Bob's made it easy to have a good relationship. He has, very easy. So I'll take credit, but in fact, it probably lies over there in the guy in the tan jacket. But anyway, I think in agriculture particularly, it has become our job to educate. People simply do not know what we do or what we're about, and we're taken for granted, which aren't we all. We're busy working for a living, and whatever we do for a living reaches out into that, and we don't tell our story very well. So we at the department have worked very hard. In the last year, we developed a couple magazines, Cultivating Colorado. We put that out. We've gone Facebook all the time. We constantly do that sort of thing, trying to convey the message to those who live in an insulated world, insulated from us, except at the grocery store and the gas station. I don't think otherwise we can make it. There's not enough of us anymore. You can't help but you look at the headlines. I mean, we get, they want to talk about rural versus urban. I don't see that at all, Bob. I see urban just not knowing anything about us. I don't think they're angry or upset with us. I don't think it's a fight card. I mean, I spoke at El Pomar, and they said rural versus, I said, where's the fight card? I don't see it. I mean, I just think it becomes our job to inform them that we need your help, because without your help, you're going to run right over the top of us. And we won't be missed till we're not there. And so I think that becomes more our responsibility. But we have to have their help, because this is on a collision course, and I know how this is going to work. I mean, I'm a rabbit, I'm tired, and I'm in front of a coyote. And so without the help, agriculture will be bulldozed, because we don't have the money to buy the water. Putting it down a corn row doesn't work as well as putting it on somebody's lawn. And so we're going to need everybody's help to decide that agriculture does matter. Otherwise, we'll never make her, Bob. And I know I'm sounding negative, but I think it's also my job to be a realist. I'm in a realist business. I don't care if I want the corn to make 300 bushel an acre. If that's all that's out there is 250, that's what's out there. And so we become in the real. So I know I haven't answered your question, because I don't have a good answer, Bob. But I think it's educating the public and having everybody's help to understand where ag comes from. Thank you. We're great stewards of the land.
Commissioner Zimmerman.
I just want to say thank you. I of course, cannot say it better than Commissioner Bray and Commissioner Brown just did. I think that is absolutely something that I feel like this commission can bring to the conversation when we talk about recreation being a part of understanding the importance of the relevancy of CPW, how it affects them, how they affect us. And this is where that open communication, that open dialogue really comes into play, where if we don't have private land, if we don't have ag, if we don't have sportsmen, here's what happens. If we just build trails and we just use trails and we make it a free-for-all, here's the impacts that we have. We no longer have the nature that we so badly need and want. We no longer have, here are the potential consequences. And so I think that, again, CPW's role in this as we move forward is essential, because I don't know that there is another entity, another agency that can bring that consistent understanding, commitment, responsibility, whatever word we want to use, to the table. So I just want to let you know I appreciate this conversation, and I want to make sure that we continue to toe that line, I guess, for lack of a better phrase.
Well, mankind is a wonderful distorter. And we often think in short bursts, which is, in society today, if it's 5 minutes, we've had a long burst. And so we don't look at the long, those of us in agriculture look at very, very, very long-term impacts. I was on CPR the other day, and they were asking me about climate change and how are farmers going to adapt to climate change? I said, well, we adapt every year to climate change. Ours is built on 3- and 5-year averages, and we're used to working in that environment. We'll be fine. Will it be good? Maybe yes, maybe no. We'll be fine. We work in that environment all the time. We're the closest to the land of anybody. And so at the end of the day, without your cooperation, Director Zimmerman, and the group, what this group does, agriculture's got a real problem.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown.
And I'm making it sound like my place is for sale, right? Well, I got 2 problems with that. It's not, and Peggy's got to sign the deed. It's not. We're optimistic by nature. Thank you.
Peggy is a very nice lady. I hope she can come to our dinner tonight. So.
She'll probably show up.
Good.
I've got to run back to Denver, so.
Director Broscheid, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and commissioners, good morning. Right back at you, Don. Couldn't agree more with everything you've said. And, that's one of the, I look at those tractors and I remember working on that farm in Ohio and with a brush hog on the back and for days and days. So and beehives and all the other things that you run over with your brush hog. But, and then coupled that with working with the landowner program right out of school, I think it showed me early on how important private landowners, agriculture, and that group and that collaboration is. We have to work. We need to work. We should work better and constantly better. You come out on this way, if it wasn't for private landowners and agriculture, the mountain plover would probably be on the endangered list and close to extinction, at least in Colorado. And it was the landowners who stepped up. And sometimes we need to strengthen those relationships. So I think as long as I've been here and will be here, we're going to continue to do that. And we need to kick it into second gear, because if they don't know where their food comes from, they certainly don't know where their wildlife comes from. And I couldn't agree with you more. We talked a little, Madeline talked a little bit, and Commissioner Garcia about the executive order and attending that. Madeline did a great job, as always, about what that executive order lays out for us. But in my mind, I think it does. It shows the leadership that this commission and this agency has, at least in Governor Hickenlooper's eyes, about leading this thing forward. You look in there, talk about the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, which has a huge agricultural component in there, and an all-inclusive approach, and that he'll be getting that sometime in January to sign. I think he's been somewhat briefed on it, but we'll run through that. And I think this is the most comprehensive state SCORP that I've seen in the country, about how we were looking at what the Colorado way is collaboration. And the other that it mentioned in there is the importance of the lottery and the Great Outdoors Colorado is in this discussion, and how important that is. And then the third piece that you've probably seen is what it references the Colorado Outdoor Partnership. And where this group has come from about 4 years ago to where it is now is essentially recognized as these leaders. And I'll talk a little bit more about the co-op, because it's a very, very strong group later on. But I wanted to really, my view from this is really with the leadership that the governor has placed in our body and our work and in our responsibility, I think speaks volumes. Of not only how we're perceived, but how we're leading. And so that, more to come on that, and we're going to start to have discussions on that. And I have a presentation later, and I hope I don't screw it up, but the Governor's Conference on Tourism, or GovCon, was where the governor rolled out CoTrex, and we'll go through this kind of at the end a little bit about what this app is as far as trails go. But attended that conference, and that was in Vail a few weeks ago. And also got to sit down and meet the new lottery director. You all may remember Laura Solano was here. She came to the commission, and I think she's moved on. And Tom Sievers, the new director, executive director of the lottery, and then he has a new deputy director, Jen Anderson, not our Jen Anderson, but another Jen. And then, of course, you know Colin Waters. He's always here at the commission meetings and talking about the lottery. So we had a really good discussion on what his vision was, certainly to increase revenue. I think that's the obvious direction he's got, but looking at more of the partnership that he can do with us to not only promote lottery sales, but also promote the revenue that can come back. So it's certainly a symbiotic relationship that we have there. Leading, well, prior to, up to, and post the election, I know Don's been doing this too, transition documents, and really making sure I think a seamless transition. What are we working on? What are some of the issues that we're dealing with now? And as the new administration and Governor-elect Polis's administration comes in, we're trying to make this seamless and informative and collaborative, and just try not to disrupt government as much as possible in the future. And so we continue to work on all of those documents. I think DNR has submitted its plan. It's very thorough, but very high level. And then there's some specifics in there that we have included as far as employees and buildings and those things. So you tried not to make that thing about 600 pages, but very succinct. And for many of you that have gone through this, you know what I'm talking about. We also did the new commissioner orientation, which I think is, I always think it's great because I love to see the faces or just some other face in between. And we had you in there all day. And 3 of the 4 came back, so that's good. It's a record, but anyway, what I've told our staff is we really had to strike hard and quick to get you not only ready for this meeting, but the orientation goes on for a very long time, and we certainly would appreciate your feedback. I think it's the feedback that you're getting sort of as the students of this orientation allows us to change it and make it better each and every time. And just know that it's not a one and done. There's a lot more pain and suffering to come. So anyway, any way we can help for new and old and somewhere in between commissioners, there's a lot to learn, and we know that. And if there's any way we can help you get up to speed as quickly as possible, we're always here. All the staff that are here or not here are always willing to help you become the best commissioner as possible. And like I think I mentioned to you at your orientation, is our job is to get you the information to make the best informed decision. Whatever that takes, however that takes, we're going to do it. And you have a big job, and I wanted to make sure that you're getting information, all of the commissioners are getting information that you'll make that great decision. So I'll mention a little bit about the co-op, the Colorado Outdoor Partnership. This was, I know I mentioned a little bit in the orientation, but just to rehash this, was sort of, discussions have already gone this way with Commissioner Bray's meeting and others, and we knew with the recreation boom, we had, of course, the wildlife mission and the recreation mission of the agency, the agricultural component, the public lands component. We were really not coordinated on among the federal, state, local governments, the NGOs. And we used an opportunity at what we call the Partners Conference, and I'll give you all the dates. We have those finalized that are coming up. This is an annual conference that we host to say, do you all see what is coming down the road if we don't set aside the 5% we disagree with and focus on the 90% we do agree with? Otherwise, we're going to tear each other apart and all things will suffer. And so this co-op was born really as a way of just getting leaders of these organizations, not all of them, but some of them, around the table to say, do you see this and how do we attack it? How do we lead? And what was born out of this was the Colorado Outdoor Partnership that we participate in but do not lead. We want others to lead. We have bikes, mountain bikers, we have land conservation, we have agriculture there, we have parks and wildlife, the federal agencies, and we're really trying to develop basically a cohesive vision, collaborative vision that talks about where we're going in the future and how we're going to do it. And a couple of things that popped out of that was, well, we all need funding, and we all need funding at the federal and state level. So things like Farm Bill are very important. The Recovering America's Wildlife Act, our excise taxes, Pittman Robertson and Dingell Johnson, what we're doing with license revenue. Why should people care about Don's measly little $50 million budget? And what does he do with that? And so anyway, what had come out of, basically has come out of this co-op was knowing that, of course, the election is coming. We've made a lot of headway. That they created this Pathways document, and it's called the Pathways, is to inform the new administration about why this group is important and why it exists. And there are several cornerstone goals that they laid out that did talk about why funding is important, why GOCO is important, why agriculture and private landowners are important. And so this was really this group that pulled it together to say, we want to keep not only what this group is doing, but we want the momentum to, and we have a lot of work to do. And so support us, and we really want to work with you. And so it did turn to that 90% we were going to focus on that we agree with, and not let the 5% of basically allow us, and that 5% can be, is it wilderness, is it not? Is it threatened and endangered species, is it not? Is it Democrat or is it Republican? And allowed us to put all that stuff aside and talk about the big picture things. So that document's available. I will shoot that to you. For the Partners Conference, April 24th, I better make sure I wrote that down right, April 24th through the 26th, is it's a 3-day deal that's in Breckenridge, Colorado, Commissioner Zimmerman's backyard. She is, and many commissioners have been there. You're all invited. It's a great event. We were lining up some speakers, and we are actually going to carve out as well an agricultural component, because I remember Don caught me last year and said, let's do this, and it feeds right into what we're doing. So anyway, those dates are there. We'll get you more information probably via Laura here soon. We have two folks that you'll probably see that have, well, one folk that has been hired, Kim Rogers. She's our new real estate section manager. She's been on board for a few months now, I believe, weeks, months. She's going to be up in front of you talking about what real estate is. Seems like a really good hire. She gets it. And that's all I'll say about that. And then for the commission, as you know, is since I've gotten here, leadership development is a really big issue for me. It not only helps with succession planning, but it helps us with a lot of the challenges and opportunities that we've got out there. And one component of that, what we've been doing, is called the Daniels Leadership School. This is through the University of Denver's program. Commissioner Zimmerman went full on this one and got her MBA through that program. We have much of a reduced program. And for the agency, we send about 30+ people through this every year, and they get somewhat of a high-level overview, but deep enough, I would say, to really make them realize oh, I've been doing it wrong, or I can do it better. We've got about 120+ people have gone through this, this program that's specifically designed for us. And we also brought others in from other departments and divisions who've gone through as well. But the big one, the gusto one, is the National Conservation Leadership Institute. This is run by the Harvard Business School of Law that is specifically focused on natural resources managers and from tribal governments, local governments, state and federal. It was born about 14 years ago I had the privilege of going through the third year of that as a third cohort of that, and the most recent one that has gone through is Margaret Taylor. She just got back from her first stint. It was 2 full weeks of intense learning and training. That will make certainly the 4th person in the agency that has gone through. And this is intense. I mean, if Harvard is teaching this, you know, you're getting your money's worth on it. But that leads Pat Dorsey, Heather Dugan, Reed DeWalt, and myself now as 4 graduates from, I think, one of the best leadership trainings, life-altering, I think, leadership programs in the country. It's very, very competitive, extremely competitive. For about 35 or 36 slots, you have people competing from all over the country that want to get a seat in there. So welcome back, Margaret. I know you're going to use that information very, very well. The upcoming conference, commissioners, the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies Conference, I think I mentioned to the new commissioners, we do 2 meetings a year. There's a summer meeting in July, a little bit longer, and then there's a winter meeting that's short, but it does include commissioners. We are the only regional association that has commissioner committees. The others have. Well, I think most of the other regional associations don't have commissions. This is governor to the director, and that's it. So that is WAFWA. It is January 3rd through the 7th in Tucson, Arizona. I think where that other college is down in there.
Bear down.
I had a Raz Hauser, Commissioner Hauser. She went to U of A. I went to ASU. So that's we dig each other when I can, and I have the mic. But anyway, it's in Tucson. I know we've sent 2 commissioners. I know Commissioner Zimmerman's willing to go. If you're looking at going or able to go, Tucson is pretty nice that time of year. But it's a really neat discussion of a lot of specific topics that I mentioned to the commissioners, all of the commissioners, is that our involvement in regional and national associations is extremely important. When you're starting to drive national policy or regional policy or even congressional legislation, I firmly believe being there and being at the table to drive that is very important. Otherwise, you get driven. I think Commissioner Brown said that very, very well earlier. So, and then finally, Mr. Chairman, if you allow me to recognize Madeline and all. I'm going to embarrass her. She wanted to sneak out the back door, but I'm going to embarrass her. But I've worked with Madeline a very long time. I remember I started working with you, and you were the Western Governors Association. We stood up, I think, one of the most powerful data systems in the country with the CHAT, the Crucial Habitat Assessment Tool, when I was working in my years in Arizona. And then Madeline was hired, I don't know, about 6-7 months before into DNR. And then right on the heels of that, I got hired and came up. And that was 5 years ago. And I've worked with you, I think, for at least a decade. And your contributions to wildlife, to recreation, to politics, to my own personal development. You're one of the good ones, Madeline, and we are really going to miss you. And to let folks know how hard you do work. I think she had no less than a couple hundred high-profile projects sitting on her desk, and her nice demeanor, don't let it fool you. She is a bulldog, and she's a very nice bulldog, nicest bulldog I've ever seen. But you know, thank you for what you've done. I mean, sage grouse has been every day, and where we are, I think, is a very good place where many other states are envious, and I think that's no small part to your leadership. So I want to personally thank you for what you've done. I think most people have no idea. They just aren't exposed to what you've done, you know, for us and for all the other divisions in the department. I'm sure they'll say the same thing. So I will miss you and best of luck. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Rudder, you're up.
We not get any questions or comments?
I'm sorry. Would you have some?
I do.
Commissioner Garcia.
I do.
Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, real
I
quick.
just wanted quickly, Bob, you talked about the transition documents that you're putting together. And Don, I'm sure your group has put together transition documents. I just wanted to say 8 years ago, I was a co-chair of Governor Hickenlooper's transition team. And so I looked at a lot of those transition documents and read them over and over and over. I can tell you what is as important, if not more important, and that is you people talking to that transition team. I know Governor Ritter is on the transition team. I traded emails or texts with him this morning, and I would ask that you reach out to him and others that you know. Don, I'm sure you are, to talk to these people, because it's what you say to them that I think is more important than the documents that they have to go through. So I would ask everybody to take a look, see who's on this transition team, who the co-chairs are, and take the time to give them a call.
I think we have Governor Ritter with us on Saturday, do we not?
So. Mr. Chairman, real quick, I forgot to do my presentation. Madeline made me misty, so I fell apart on this, but then
Okay,
as she always does, keeps me lined out. If you don't mind, this is the rollout. Laura's going to put it up here on this screen, but this is the roll-up of the CoTrax, Colorado mobile app trail app, I guess, that we have been working on for just about under a year. This is really cool. If you're really into apps, I'm not going to get very technical on it, but this is what the governor highlighted as one of his priorities, that we will get this done after he recognized that we didn't have this, and there was no one-stop shop for trails that are around the state of Colorado, but it's to help our residents and even non-residents and visitors plan an outdoor adventure with real-time factual information. It includes 40,000 miles of trail, 3,600 trailheads, and it's all, of course, in the palm of your hand and your mobile device. But it's the only application in the country that is this comprehensive and includes many types of recreations, from OHVs, ATVs, motorcycles, hiking, biking, and horseback riding, and then everything in between. But the real fascinating part of this was the data was amassed from 236 different land and recreation managers in the state. So everybody had their own database or their own little corner of the state. This allowed it to roll up into one. Oh, did you skip one? Okay, so the featured routes are that. It is, you're right. Sorry. There she is again. Let's just search. Of course, you can look at this. It'll search by type of recreation, area of the state, level of difficulty. Your trip is the right kind of adventure. Basically, it's what you're looking for. You know what you're signing up for, and the worst thing you can do is get stuck on a trail that you aren't prepared for, or physically or mentally or whatever. So we just basically know what you're getting as you embark around the state. The featured routes are curated content. It tells a story about that trail. It can be used by trail managers to guide people to less known or less crowded trails, for example. This is a quick snapshot of that. And you know, this is constantly updating information as we go. The app can capture user-generated comments. It has a tree fallen over the trail. It has, is it in good shape? Is it in bad shape? Again, I think it's getting that interaction with trail users that helps land managers in the road. We can also look at some areas of crowding or not crowding and start to direct folks that way as well. And this is real quick, last two slides. It's the only trail app that includes trails, like I said, for all types of users. We want CoTrax to be a gateway for getting people outside, encourage them to become more comfortable with those activities, of course, but then graduating them to more user-specific apps like the suite of REI apps, the MTB project, hiking project, et cetera. So it's really sort of a beginner, all-encapsulating approach, and that you can then use that to springboard to more complicated or more sophisticated sort of applications, et cetera. I use it on my road bike too. It's very, very accurate and very real time. I think we all kind of have those apps that you can use, like Fitbits and those kind of things, but I think when you have a look at trails, you can search, select. Anyway, long story short, this is really, really cool. There's a lot of people that were involved in this, from Madeline to Alex. Dean is in the audience right behind Jeff. Margaret and her folks, all the regional managers, staff, trail staff, et cetera. Nick DeLaca was very engaged in this to make this thing look great. Now we're going to continue this on. This company did a great job, and you'll see on the screen, it's trails.colorado.gov. It's free to download. Download it. It's what this thing, I've not done this justice of what this can really do. So if you have time, go ahead and explore, download it, explore it, check it out. I would love to hear any feedback that you might have, and have fun. So.
I checked it out.
Questions for the director, Commissioner Zimmerman. Oh, Commissioner Hauser, please.
I think everyone knows where I'm going with this. When do we get to have an app for all of our license and fees and user? And I think this is amazing. Obviously, I'm certainly going to use it. I currently use AllTrails and MTB Project. Two things I'd love to, I think that it already is included, and I'd love to see expanded, that education stewardship component.
Yes.
This trail is closed for seasonal closure because it's elk calving, whatever reason. Having that additional piece of, again, communication. If I'm a mountain biker and a trail is closed, or if I'm if I'm a user and a trail is closed, if I understand why, most people don't want to go harm or bother,
I agree.
Wildlife, or if it's closed because it's muddy, most people don't want to have a negative impact on the trail. So having that ability to add an educational component, there's a tree down, or it's closed for this reason, or this new trail is under construction for this reason. Here's how you can learn more. Here's what the Trails Committee is. Here's, some of those next step, right, that call to action. I think that's incredible that we have this tool now that we can say, here, you can go to this MTB project for more information, or you can go here for more information. So having that stewardship education component, anytime we can be hitting new people that maybe don't understand the value of stewardship and the importance of conservation, this is another way to do that. And then, of course, something that I talk about every meeting, making sure we can somehow get, if we are able with this alternative funding study, if we are able to get another funding opportunity, that instead of it being some sort of a license or a tag or something that you have to carry, that it be an app that you can show on your phone to say, yes, I am out here, I'm following this trail, and here's my fee, tag, stamp, whatever it's going to be.
Absolutely.
So thank you, and great job to everyone who has been working so hard on this. Very impressive.
Commissioner Hauser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I would say I learned recently and read that Arizona State is now requiring an SAT for admission. That's great for your alma mater.
I'm glad I went when I did that.
It's on the rise. Anyway, two things. One, I wanted to say that I think this is also very cool. But stepping back earlier on and having skimmed the progress on the strategic plan, I just would say kudos. I mean, I don't know that it's kind of skimmed past that, but in the packet, just really great work by the division and to throw out a strategic plan that doesn't just sit on the shelf and that actually has actionable components so that we're able to look back on it, I think was really helpful. I suspect, I can't speak for the brand new commissioners, but it was still helpful for me to kind of continue to catch up on that. So anyway, just wanted to remark on that as well. Thanks.
Commissioner Taylor.
I concur, actually. Lots of highlights and underscores on your report, so thank you for that. Learned a lot. Also, on behalf of the CoTrex app, I think, and we'll talk about this too, I think in the Meridian report, when we consider technology for how we engage our future consumers and recreationists, I think the app is going from nice to have to need to have, and as an engagement, but also a transactional piece. I think I think this is definitely a step in the right direction, and how and where we market that is going to be equally important across agencies and platforms.
Commissioner Garcia.
On the CoTrex, The Headwater chapter of Trout Unlimited is currently undertaking GPSing all of the fishing, public fishing access in Grand County. Is that in any way going to be possible to tie into something like this?
Yeah, that's a good, yeah, I'm aware of that, and there's several fishing apps out there, including our own. I'm not sure, you know, if we would expand it to be rivers and fishing and hunting, I don't see why not. I think this is a very powerful tool. How could we bring that in? I think that's a great question. And instead of having 30 apps out there, how can you make it where you just have one? It's a good question. I'll have to think about that one. Talk to these guys. But the governor, when he rolled this out, Mr. Chairman, he was at the GovCon, and of course, you always let the governor announce the big stuff. There's part of his joke, as you've all heard him talk. It was he's got a lot of humor in what he says, and he says, you know, one of the most complicated decisions we had to make was the name. And it's now Cotrex, but he said he wanted Colotrex, but he said that sounded like a medical procedure that wasn't very pleasant, so we changed it to Cotrex. And of course, he always gets laughs, so we appreciated him rolling that out.
Outstanding. I think we're ready for Mr. Rudder now. Thank you, Director.
Good morning, Commission. My name is Justin Rudder. I'm the Assistant Director for Financial Services. With the Chair's indulgence, I would like to also point out David Porter back there on your right side. He's our Deputy for Financial Services. If anybody wants to talk numbers for an extended period of time, come find us. We can do that and enjoy doing that. I bring a financial update to you today. I do want to point out that as it came up in Finance Subcommittee, there is no dashboard in this presentation. That was an oversight on my part. I got so focused on reporting out last year's results that I forgot to talk about what's going on currently. So that will be in January. I'll be sure to bring a dashboard to you. Kind of a brief overview for the financial update. We are a $230 million-ish agency. When talking about parks and wildlife operations, a useful rule of thumb would be about 1/3 parks, 2/3 wildlife, but the capital side of our budget kind of skews that a little bit. We have, this presentation is broken down into those parks and wildlife sides, and then it highlights our two most important cash funds, the Parks Cash Fund and the Wildlife Cash Fund. They are our largest, and that's where our day-to-day operations get paid out of. We have another 25 additional cash funds, which have various restrictions from the legislature, and most of them require appropriation from the legislature to expend from. We also have a significant amount of federal funding, which includes the Dingell-Johnson, Pittman-Robertson Act funds that Director Broscheid referenced. Those are kind of our largest federal funds. And then on the cash grant side, we have GOCO as a partner, which includes Quadrants for Wildlife and Parks Purpose. And they are our largest grantor, but not our largest cash grantor, but not our own. Between federal and cash grants, we have about 350 active grants right now, in addition to our appropriated cash funds. So that's kind of a broad overview. I think the message I'm trying to get is that our financial picture is fairly complex. We try to drive all expenditures to the most restrictive fund source so that we have the most flexibility when we need to make changes. And that's kind of the philosophy that drives us. So when you see these next couple of slides, they are kind of broad overviews, but the picture behind the scenes is really convoluted. But I'd love to talk about it at any time if anybody would like more information.
Justin, let me interrupt there, and just for the new commissioners, if you have, it's come up for me a couple of times, you can call staff and meet with them. If you have very narrow issues, or if you're trying to get ready for a contentious meeting, say I've done that on predator meetings with some of the staff, and so don't feel like you have to wait to make that phone call. If you do have questions, or if you want to go and sit down for an hour or two and go through things, that is available to you. So, and it's been helpful to me. So, go ahead, Justin.
All right, thank you. So what is up on the screen now is an excerpt from some of the files that are in your downloads. There are 3 files in your downloads that are probably easier to see than the PowerPoint. and they have a lot more information, but I kind of pulled out the high-level highlights. So what is up currently, and it's probably hard to see on the screen, is the all parks funds and for the Parks Cash Fund separately for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018. So on the left side, you can see that as when we look across all parks funds, we were in the black. We made a little bit of money, but that is a combination of across a lot of sources, and the picture on the right is a little bit less rosy. In the Parks Cash Fund, we lost approximately $4 million, so expenses exceeded revenues by $4 million. This is distorted by an accounting transaction. To go back a little bit, in 2013, we had the flood that damaged a lot of our parks properties across the state. FEMA and state risk management, we filed claims with them, but in order to get the parks up and running and get the damage corrected as quickly as possible, we used lottery direct distribution, which is 10% of lottery revenues that come directly to parks, to get those projects rolling. We completed a number of projects, and then at the end of the day, we received about $3.4 million in reimbursements from the insurance companies. So as those claims were approved, we had been depositing them into the Parks Cash Fund. We had however, been paying for those repairs out of the lottery fund. So during fiscal year 18, wrapping up the 2013 flood event, we transferred $3.4 million from the Parks Cash Fund to lottery to ensure that the expenses were being hit appropriately. So if that had not happened, we would still have a slight loss on the Parks Cash Fund. But there are other extraordinary events. The Parks Cash Fund, as has been true for years, is kind of riding on the edge. We are spending what we are making, and that's because as we make more money, we have more visitors, we have more operational costs, and it's kind of a self-feeding machine. Parks used to receive general fund to a significant degree. They lost that in the 2008 downturn when budget cuts were going into effect. In 2010, that was the last of the general fund left. So the fact that the park system continues to operate on GOCO and user fees primarily is a testament to the ingenuity of our park managers. We are continuing to monitor the Parks Cash Fund. Looking into the sub-revenues a little bit, it looks like visitation, the annual passes and daily passes were flat year over year. Still record number of visitation and about the same number of paid customers coming through the door. Camping was up slightly. If we look a little bit deeper, it appears that some of the better numbers came from the end of calendar year, camping year 2017. So from the July 1 through August, September timeframe, or even later. We had a late onset of winter. We had a mild fall. And so it looks like there was stronger camping and visitation during that time frame. And with the late onset of spring and the early winter this year, I am concerned about where total revenues will be for visitation and camping. So that's something we're monitoring, and I will try to have a better answer on what the last half of camping year 2018 looks like with the dashboard at the next meeting. This slide includes the all wildlife funds on the left side and the wildlife cash fund on the right side. Wildlife continued to have excellent revenue growth. We saw slight increases to hunting revenues. CPI on out-of-state hunters can account for a large part of the revenue growth there. But we saw continued increases in angling, which is great. We had not quite as strong growth as we saw last year, but we continue to have more paid anglers in the state. Wildlife Cash Fund as a whole made $11 million of revenue in excess of expense. That includes habitat stamp funds, which, although we call them habitat stamp fund, it is actually wildlife cash. It just is earmarked as it goes in. So it's when looking at a fund-based picture like this, you see both. But base wildlife cash expenses versus revenue, we had a profit of $4 million-ish. So continue to see strong revenues there. Wildlife side undertook a $10 million budget cutting exercise some years ago, and I think the attitude on the wildlife side has been very much about tightening our belts and making sure that we don't exceed our revenues. It's always a good policy, but we have seen some growth, and I think with the passage of future generations, we're about to see a lot more growth in those revenues. I think there's some great opportunities on that side of the agency. So normally in a commission report, if you had a chance to go through where the status of where it's at now, we would break out a lot of detailed revenue, which we are doing here for the wildlife side. Due to the change in our license and pass system to IPAWS, we've been working with the contractor to get the required reports that were part of the contract that are detailed product sales reports. We started, I think, 3 months ago working on this with the contractor, trying to make sure that we understood the data and the data was being pulled correctly. And when we first started...
Justin, this is Aspira, right?
This is Aspira, yes.
Thank you.
When we first started the process, the difference between CORE, which is our accounting system, and the product sales report that Aspira provided was $30 million. There was $30 million less reported sales in the Aspira system than we had actually booked in revenue in CORE. We are now down, and it's on the bottom, though it's hard to see. There's a line called Reconcile to General Ledger. That's where we make a kind of gross adjustment if there are small discrepancies between CORE and the product system. Last year we were at $20,000, and now we're at 1.2 million or 1.4 million. We continue to have a weekly call with the contractor. We continue to analyze the data as quickly as possible when it arrives and then turn it back around. But currently, we know that there is $1.2 million more of revenue in CORE than Aspira reports in product sales. So I have a number of staff working on trying to track that down. I'm confident we will do so, but it's an extended process. We've taken the wildlife data to this point. We've looked at the registration data on the park side, and it's fairly close. There's another reconciling item we need to discover, and then we have not started on the parks data yet. But that's kind of the process that financial services is following to ensure that we can report out accurately on what our sales were. So the numbers above are fairly solid, but there might be a $1.2 million shift in somewhere.
Justin, can I ask you a question on that? Is that going to be part of Aspira's presentation? I don't know if that's fair for you or for Mr. Thorson or Mr. Chick, but are we going to hear from them on this reporting issue tomorrow?
I don't know what their planned presentation is. We can ask Gary, or I'm sure you can ask them during the presentation as well.
Why don't you guys come to the microphone so we can get it on the record?
Morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Corey Chick, License and Pass Section Manager. I'm meeting with Seth Rosenberg and hopefully the CEO tonight, so I can have them address this tomorrow as well.
Commissioners, I would like to hear more on this from them tomorrow. The reporting this is supposed to be one of the big benefits, so great, let's do that if we can. Okay. Thank you.
And I will say that once we get confidence in the data, there's a lot of data there, and I'm excited about the possibilities. One of the entries that I noted when we were looking through the data is how many cans of Diet Dr. Pepper were sold in June. So that's a very granular level of data that we could use to inform a lot of our programs. And to that end, once we are feeling confident in the data, I do want to go out in the field and work with field staff to understand how they're using the system and make sure that what we think we're seeing reported is accurate. On the right, at the upper right, is the reserve calculation for the Wildlife Cash Fund, which is based on the current policy. Net current assets minus those dollars earmarked for habitat stamp, which I referenced earlier, leaves a $21 million reserve in the Wildlife Cash Fund. The current policy is $7 to $9 million and is written to exclude earmarked funds, which is why a habitat stamp comes out. I think it might be worth, I would like to propose bringing a look at the reserve calculation perhaps to the January meeting, because I think there are some assets or some facets to it that we aren't considering. We have a large capital program. Well, not on the wildlife side, we don't have that large of a capital program, but it's about to grow substantially. And I think to the degree we have multi-year obligations out there, that might be a consideration within the reserve, which is not taken into account currently. Referenced future generations earlier, and I wanted to highlight what was in part of that conversation in passing legislation last year and the year before. I presented this to the Commission in Yuma, I believe, last year, which is the Wildlife and Parks Forecasts. And so it's a multi-year look. It's a currently 8-year look into the future. that takes known needs such as dams and other priorities into account and tries to timeline out how those expenses will hit and what the effect on our cash funds would be. So this is not currently updated. I was meeting with my staff last week to begin the process, and I think as we continue to implement the Future Generations Bill, we're going to need to report back kind of in the same format that we used to talk to legislature about what the problem was. So this will be an ongoing product that I can bring periodically, maybe annually, to the commission to look at where our forecasted shortfall was and is, and which projects we're kind of funding with the increased revenue from increased license prices. So that's the wildlife forecast, not updated, but you can see the large hole that we were trying to fill at the end of the 8-year forecast, and that was the kind of the impetus for the Future Generations Bill. And then on the park side, also you see a projection. I think the park side, perhaps being a smaller cash fund, got a little bit less attention, but the parks cash fund as a whole does have a lower volume of customers coming through. So there's really 2 spots where you can make major changes in revenues, which is annual and daily passes, which are capped on their increase in the bill. But once you get into some of the other subcategories of products, there just isn't sufficient volume to really move the needle on the cash fund overall. So I think staff has presented a proposal to increase substantial revenues for parks. But it takes a lot of so that includes camping, and I think it takes a lot of there's not a lot of future increases that I see that are going to really move the needle unless we start pricing aggressively. Just kind of a heads up that wildlife has a lot more flexibility in price increases, it feels like, and the parks cash fund will struggle to increase large numbers of revenue.
Questions, commissioners? Justin, on that last point, is that because you're saying we're going to raise our camping fees and we're going to need to do it more quickly? I'm not quite getting why you see there's not some flexibility there.
So I think the schedule that we have brought before the commission has some fairly large increases. I think you can't do that annually, so we can't come back in and next year and do another substantial increase to parking or camping passes. And then if we're looking at volume, it's daily passes, annual passes. You can sell a lot of those, like 180,000 combined, and so changes in price there do make large changes, and that 180 is not right anyway, but changes to those can make large changes in revenue, but a lot of the other sub-products don't have the volume to do much. If you increase registrations, which are earmarked funds at this point, it's a $10 million revenue stream total, so you'd need 10 or 20% increases to get $1 or $2 million out of a $80 million budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, we're a little bit behind on time, so what I think we'll do is just go ahead and take the scheduled break now because our most effective and efficient presenter is up next, and Danielle, and I think we'll make the time.
preliminary agenda for you, starting with agenda item number 9, which is a citizen petition for chapter W17, which is our damage caused by wildlife chapter. And this citizen petition is proposing to allow the hazing of geese with dogs year-round. This is an action item for your consideration, and it is pink in color following the pre-meeting memo that I put together. The petitioner's name is Tim Eubank, and he runs Up and Away, which is a goose control company in the Denver metro area. And the regulation that he is petitioning to change is Regulation 17-131A, which prohibits the use of dogs for hazing geese from March 1st through July 31st annually. Mr. Eubank is here today to present his petition to you.
Danielle, if you just pause for a sec. If I could just have the audience be a little more quiet. We're getting a lot of feedback up here on the mics, so thank you. Thank you, Danielle.
So Mr. Eubank is here to present his petition to you all today. So with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it over to him.
Very good. Thank you.
Maybe and maybe not.
That's why I'm not worried about it.
She just does such, she's so, she knows her work.
Or do we have a timer on this? So, okay, I'll manage it. No worries. Welcome.
Hi, sorry to make you wait.
Right.
I'm going to try to make this as brief as I can. I know you guys are very busy. I appreciate you seeing us on this issue with the goose control. I think I was pretty detailed in the commission or in the petition as far as why I think the regulation needs to get changed. We've also got a couple other third parties here that I've spoken with this morning that have some other concerns. They're going to get up and speak as well. So one of the main things that I want to make sure everyone's aware of, I'm very open for any discussion, it's not what I have in my petition has to be, and I'm dead set against that, so to speak. Obviously, just because I do a petition doesn't mean it's going to go into play, but I'm not dead set on what is in the petition. I want to do what's best for the goose and what's best for the citizens that have to deal with the geese. My biggest issue that I have with the geese is during the nesting season, they get so aggressive. If you get into a golf course or a city park, you've got plenty of open space. There's lots of room between the geese and the humans. You don't get a lot of conflict. I get into some of my apartment complexes, and as dramatic as it may sound and over-exaggerating as it may sound, they literally hire us out for protection. They might have 2 or 3 people attacked each week at certain locations. Other locations, I don't have any, other apartment complexes, we don't have any issues at all with the aggressiveness of the geese. But for the most part, it's something that I know Dan is going to come up and talk on, and another gentleman from the USDA, and I think it's something that we all need to work together, not only to try to create goose, because all I'm really doing with the goose control business is creating goose-free pockets. I'm not really helping the population any. We're just pushing them somewhere else, and whoever is hiring us out are getting those goose-free pockets of geese. And I think there's probably a bit more of a problem that needs to be addressed, and I think Dan's going to be bringing that up as well as the other gentleman from the USDA. So to try to keep things as brief as possible, I'm going to go ahead and let Dan come up, give his little spiel, and that's kind of what I've got.
Very good. Why don't you take a seat, Mr. Eubank, near there, and then if we have further questions for you after the other 2 speakers, then we'll call you back.
Outstanding. Thank you.
You bet. I think I've got 2 comments from Mr. Lowney. Would you like to start, and then we'll finish up with Mr. Gates after that?
Yes, please. Thank you, Commissioner Howard, Commissioners, Director Broscheid. I'll give you a little bit of background first, since it's the first time I've presented to you folks. I'm Martin Lowney. I'm the State Director for the Wildlife Services Program, which is a federal agency that provides leadership in wildlife damage management. We do this through technical assistance, provide an operational control to solve problems. Our agency's been working on the resident Canada goose issue across the United States since the 1970s. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I've been working on Canada geese problems since 1991. I started in Virginia, then New York, and now Colorado. I was on the Atlantic Flyway Technical Committee for 17 years, where I helped write the resident Canada goose management plan for the Atlantic Flyway. I developed models for the states to be able to manage Canada geese in the Atlantic Flyway. I'm now here in Colorado on the Central Flyway Commission, trying to do the same thing. So I have a lot of experience managing Canada geese. And just to give you some important bullet facts about these resident Canada geese, probably the two most important facts are, in rural areas, the states have been very effective at managing resident Canada geese. Hunting works. The issue really is in urban, suburban areas. So what we learned through research is 95% of all resident Canada goose movements are 7 to 8 miles from the molt pond. That's it. So they're going to go 7 or 8 miles. You're not going to harass them and make them migrate to Canada, as many people believed. Hunting in urban and suburban areas is ineffective at solving Canada goose problems for resident geese. Hazing geese is ineffective because you just push them around. Hazing geese with dogs, it is one of the more effective techniques, but it pushes the geese around. And so to solve these problems in urban, suburban areas, it's going to take an integrated approach. You have to do some population management. It's going to take work by USDA. It's going to take work by private companies to solve and address this problem. Right now, our problem in Colorado is minor. We only have about 45,000 resident geese. Most of the eastern states have 100 to 400,000 geese in their urban areas. You don't want to go there. So when I saw this petition, I looked at it, I read it. I'm very sympathetic to the petitioner's customers. He needs more options. We all need more options. This past summer, Colorado Parks and Wildlife Services, we met with the Fish and Wildlife Service. We are developing a management plan and a framework to create more options for managing geese in Colorado. And so what I'm asking and making a request is, can we take a pause on this request? And I would ask Colorado Parks and Wildlife, form another working group like they have done in so many other issues. Let's bring us all together and develop a plan to work to manage resident Canada geese. Again, it's primarily going to be in urban, suburban areas, but that would be my request at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lowney. Let me just praise you on the work on, I did a tour of duty in Maryland 2000 to 2008 and saw that goose issue, both the absence of migratory geese and the resident geese. And the progress made in those 8 years was really phenomenal. So just highlight, I know about that work.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Gates, you're up.
Thank you, Chairman, Director, Commissioners, and I would like to welcome the new commissioners as well. I've got a handout, if you don't mind, I would like to pass around, and you guys can look at it at your leisure. So my name is Dan Gates. I'm the current president for the Colorado Chapter Trappers and Predator Hunters Association. I'm also the chair for the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management, and also a board member for the Colorado Wildlife Control Operators Association. And when this citizens petition was brought to our attention, we didn't really have concerns, more in the wording than anything, but after conversations with Mr. Lowney and Mr. Eubank, we've come to the conclusion that we would like to have some sort of additional discussions outside of here, to where we could maybe collaborate and partner with different entities, agencies, and private contractors, and come to some sort of general consensus about how to work forward, not just with this particular issue on the citizens petition, but also the entire urban goose management perspective of what we're dealing with as well. The Wildlife Control Operators Association has multiple individuals in their membership that engage in this sort of activity regularly. And we run into problems, just as Mr. Lowney had explained and what Mr. Eubank is talking about. The handout that I provided you shows information about my particular business. I run a wildlife control business in southern Colorado. I've done goose mitigation projects for the course of the last 18, 19 years over my 35-year career. And some of the things that we talk about and that have been brought to the attention of the commission are only going to continue to grow if they're not addressed. And taking one tool out of the toolbox kind of hampers everybody. Taking one tool out of the toolbox because that's the only tool that you have in it makes it even more difficult to provide some sort of palatable solution for all parties involved. So we would hope that, per Mr. Lowney's request, that the commission would recommend some sort of an ongoing discussion, and maybe we could have the chance to come back to the commission in January. The federal permit that I provided you in there expires in March of 2019, and some of that information on there could be possibly updated or revised in conjunction with this working group, and maybe come to some sort of long-term agreement through a variety of different circumstances, depending on whether you're in Fort Collins or Trinidad. Specific dates are not agreeable to some people because of timing and just because of longitude and latitude and so forth. So there's a variety of topics that could be discussed on this, but I would hope that the commission would see fit to establish some sort of alternative discussion and dialogue to where we could maybe come back to you in the future.
Director, do you want to comment on that? I know we're fond of establishing working groups that you then have to implement.
No, I think it's a great idea. I think Martin and Dan hit it well as well as the petitioner. I mean, this wildlife management, Canada geese in particular, requires a broad group of actions that bring actions to the table, like Dan or Martin do. They bring a specific set of skills, but at the end, I mean, this is where communities need to decide what to do. Parks and Wildlife, constantly gets asked to come remove these geese. And without a comprehensive plan about what that looks like, what does management look like? Is it full eradication, or is it something in between? Full eradication and doing nothing, and typically people are doing nothing until there's a problem, and then folks like Dan or Martin get called in. And what we really tried to do, I think, from the control community, Parks and Wildlife, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and USDA APHIS, is to say, you guys need to get your acts together and decide what wildlife looks like in your community, be it bears, be it Canada geese, or any of the others. And until they buy in and they contribute funding and they contribute the public input side of their community members, HOAs, we're just really, I don't think even just putting a Band-Aid on it, it's just going to keep pushing it down the road. And so we're really trying to do that approach. So I think what Dan and Martin are recommending falls right into that, but we've got to include, do a better job of including what these communities, whether it's the city of Denver or it's an HOA or a small neighborhood, they need to be included in this discussion as well. And you all know there are all kinds of opinions and emotions that run all over with wildlife control in the urban or suburban environment. And so we got to make sure that we're being as inclusive as possible. I think what they're proposing is absolutely right up. That belief that I have is that we could sit down and talk to the experts. Dan certainly is an expert in this area and has been doing it for a very, very long time. So I'd be, if the commission wishes to, we'd love to pull a group together.
Mr. Eubank, do you want to come back to the mic, and does that sound satisfactory to you?
Absolutely. I think that's the wisest course of action. I did the citizens petition not knowing what else to do to try to get the regulation eradicated. So I think with the suggestions of Dan and this other gentleman, I'm sorry, I've drawn a blank, but with the suggestion of those two gentlemen this morning, I think that's dead on. Let's not put a Band-Aid on it. Let's try to come up with some sort of long-term solution.
Great. Why don't you stay at the podium, because I think we'll have some commissioner comments and questions. So.
Okay.
Mr. Vigil.
Yes, I would ask if January is enough time, if we have it on the agenda for January, or do you need more time, like to March, to come together with something? Because I can see all the different opinions based on city parks, golf courses, apartment complexes, and there's also people that don't want to touch an animal.
Oh, absolutely.
Bee. So there's a lot of constituencies involved. So I don't know that you can do it by January.
And I think that would be something Dan would be able to answer.
If I could add to
kind of new
Jim,
to me.
if I could add to that question.
Let me just keep the
how
record clear. That's
how the
Commissioner
expiration
Garcia
of the
on.
permit factors into that, if at all. I understood there's a permit expiring in January.
Dan Gates, again, per Commissioner Vihill's question, the January component came in just through a discussion of if we were forced to come to the table at some specific time, and we could expedite conversations and dialogue, but it would be well worth the time to turn around and try to incorporate some of these other individuals and try to not drag it out, but come to some sort of a long-term agreement that you don't have to keep going back to the drawing board. As far as Mr. Garcia's comment, the permit that expires is through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I don't know the specifics on upping the numbers on that permit or not, but I think that should be part of the equation. And I think Mr. Lowney would agree, specifically if you had municipalities that were engaged in the conversation, because some of the numbers on the permit might not be agreeable to some, depending on how large of a scale program that you had to go. And if everybody wanted to try to jump on board from the Front Range, then maybe there needs to be some updates or modifications to that. That's not my recommendation, but because of the timing effect of it, we figured that try to encompass and incorporate that conversation into the equation. So if that answers your questions.
Mr. Lowney, I think I see you would like to comment.
I have a few things to say. I've done a lot of these working groups. Most of them take about 4 to 6 months to come to a final plan, and that's if you're met monthly. So that's how long it takes. As far as the federal permit, I'm the one you go through to get the Fish and Wildlife Service to issue the permit. And so the permit currently is issued to Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And there was reasons the Fish and Wildlife Service did that. That level of take is going to be transferred to Wildlife Services. Now there's also a permit process I could help Mr. Eubank's customers get a federal permit, so either he or a subcontractor for Mr. Eubanks could help his landowners. So I'm the one that Mr. Eubanks has to work with. I can get the federal permits also for his customers, for Dan Gates' customers. So this is going to be part of the education process. A lot of people are not familiar with the federal depredation permit process, and Wildlife Services is at the heart of that. We're the ones that makes the recommendation, and Fish and Wildlife Service issues the permit. We have a lot of work to do, a lot of education. More than willing to share and help and work with the different agencies and with the two gentlemen here with me to make this all happen. But you're probably looking at about 4 to 6 months to get a final product. Thank you.
So I
sorry.
guess I would say January is probably not the date, but more like our March meeting or something.
March would be tough, but possible. I guess let's see how fast we can get a committee together and get it working. You know, and I'm committed to meeting as often as the group wants to get this done.
I'm sure Dan's in the
Commissioner Brown.
As well as I, we will meet at any time we need, as often as we need.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Don Brown. The only, as we work through or toward some form of solution here, the only thing that I would like to add is the not in my backyard syndrome, which typically means they wind up in Ag's backyard. So let's look at a solution, not a transfusion or transferal of the problem. And thank you.
And that's literally what we're doing right now with this particular company.
Sure, appreciate that.
And that's why these
because it'll be easy to gravitate to the not in my backyard solution.
Commissioners, let me recognize you and let me recognize the speaker, and if the speaker could speak in the mic, because I will always get chastised by the public that they can't hear us, and if they can't hear us, they can't identify us. So, Mr. Eubank, I couldn't hear what you had to say, but please tell us.
I was just agreeing that I think that Dan and I would also be willing to meet as often as necessary to try to expedite whatever needs to get done.
So I think we have a path forward here. I don't think we need a motion or anything like that, Director, unless you would like it. Great. Well, Mr. Eubank, please feel free to keep in communication with the Commission.
Outstanding. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you.